So, good evening. Before we open up the floor for questions, I just want to have an initial conversation, and hopefully it will also give you a bit of time to formulate some of your own questions. I'd like to first congratulate Arnon on an extraordinary picture, a film that I've seen twice in 1 week, once by myself and now once with all of you here tonight. And I wanted to open by asking about how the film evolved over time. It's a film that begins on a relatively upbeat note, the music, the sorting through photos, in the flat, a flat that you visited frequently as a young boy, crossed Tel Aviv, entered into this world of Berlin, and then it obviously takes a very, very different turn as the film unfolds. But I'm curious if you could speak about when you set out to make this picture, whether you had certain expectations of what you might find or whether you just had to adjust as the story presented itself to you.
So, first of all, thank you very much to the Leo Baeck Institution to invite me. I'm very honored to be here. I think, as Billy just said in the beginning, this is the right place for this film. And, well, going back to the beginning of the making of this film, well, this whole film, I would say, it's involved with, I would say, a lot of luck, or a lot of maybe misluck also. But at the beginning of the making, I didn't even think I'm going to make a film here. I was completely occupied in another project. And then, you know, as I'm saying at the beginning of the film, my grandmother passed away. As I say, she was 98, but strange as it may sound, nobody in the family ever believed she will die. She was this kind of immortal. I think the German Jews has this in their DNA. And she passed away. And my mother called us, it's me, my sibling, my cousins, and said, well, we must decide what to do with this flat. And immediately I just grabbed my camera and come to the flat. And this is actually the first scene you've seen today. And my whole idea was to just document this place, because I felt through all my life, especially when I was grown up already, that this is kind of, it's kind of a place that it doesn't exist anymore. And soon it won't exist really. So I just had in my mind the thought to shoot it, to film it into some kind of a family archive. And I started doing it. And after the first day, and this is the first scene here. I just was grabbing my camera every time my mother called us and said, come and we need to gather together on the side. And in reality, they were and we were very lazy. It didn't happen in a day or two. And one day, downstairs, me holding my camera and my equipment, my siblings accuse me that I'm filming it in order not to take part in the... And I don't know if maybe it's some kind of a truth, because not that I'm such a lazy guy, but it was hard for me to do it. So one day, I just met downstairs a friend of mine, a camera person, a woman, and we wanted to work for a long time, and she saw me with the equipment and asked me what are you doing? And I told her, and she said, wonderful. She was a new mother with a kid, 3 years old, and she said, I'm going back to work. I didn't work for 3 years or 2 years because of my baby. If you want, I'll come and join you. And for me, it was excellent because, as I said, it was just going there. If I heard they are coming, so I grabbed my camera, and if I could come, and then I discovered they've been there, and they think I never been, able to shoot it, etc. So we doubled the team, and and I fell in love with doing it. because when you are holding the camera, there's something strange happened. When your eyes is behind the camera, you start to see things you never saw before. And after 2 months of doing it, this camera woman told me, you know, Arnon, to be honest with you, you have enough material for your archive, for your family archive, but there is no film here. And I phrased her, and she remembered it very clearly. She said, you know, it's like Seinfeld. It's a film about nothing. We were totally, I would say maybe ignorant or something like that. So I told her, you know, we just need to wait. We are like fishermen. Something will find something. I think I just didn't want it to stop. That's it. I really wasn't aware of what's going on. And even though we found the articles in the newspapers you've seen in the, also after I found it, I was not sure. I already understood that I must make a film out of it, because it's not reasonable to be in a flat with so many days and not make something out of it. But my idea was to make a short film, and even after we found those articles, I was not sure this is the film. So it was a long process, and just to end it, we have, it's a long story, maybe we...
Keep going.
So in Israel, there is, now it's very common in the world, in order to raise money to make films, well, nowadays, nobody reads scripts. They always want, you know, this is like from the high-tech, the elevator pitch. You need to, in 2 minutes, tell what your film is about. You like it or not like it. And in Israel and in many states in all over Europe, we have this pitching conference where documentary filmmakers are pitching their projects, and some buyers mainly in Israel, it's from Europe, are coming and listening, and maybe they buy the film. And the director of this organization, she heard that I'm making a film. She loved my previous film, so she wanted me to come and pitch the film. And I told her, you know, I would come, but next year, because I have no film. So she told me, Arnon, you don't understand. Nowadays, nobody have a film. Let's come and pitch it. So that was the first time I had to decide what this film is about, what's to pitch. It was in a very early stage. Of course, I shot already many, many hours in the flat, but they didn't find their way to the final version. So my idea was to pitch a film, and and you must be very, very short. So the sentence that I found was, it is going to be a film about what can you learn from the stuff people left behind. And that's what I pitched. I, of course, thought it's completely ridiculous, because nobody will invest in this film. Immediately after I finished pitching, I would say the most important guy from all the panels, he was the commission editor of Arte Germany. It's I would say the major TV station in Europe that are investing in documentaries. Said on stage, I want this film. And for me, it was the most scary moment, because I didn't understand what film is talking about. So with this guy, it took me 2 years to sign the contract. But the next morning, all 3 Israeli foundations, the secretaries called me. Our director wants your film. So that's why the way I raised the first money, and understood I must make something out of it. And to close this whole, it's a long story, of course. I worked on this film for 5 years. But the time arrived, I think it was 3 years after that, or 2.5 years after that speeching conference, and I had to screen the first version, what we call in the professional language, the rough cut, to this guy that was on stage and decided that he wants the film. And of course, it was not the film that he wanted to buy. It was completely another film we already discovered and filmed, and it was very similar or close to what you just saw. So there was,
What year was the rough cut completed?
I think it was 2009 or 2010 already. I would say it was 2010. Yeah.
And the film premieres in Israel in 2011.
Yeah, it was the premiere was in July 2011. So it was approximately, I would say, something like half a year or a little bit more, like 10 months before that. And so there was a big discussion in the editing room between me and the editor, which is a brilliant editor and a very experienced Israeli editor. What should we tell this guy? Because he happened to be the first one to come and see the film and watch the film. And she told me, forget about it, he doesn't remember. And I couldn't. So he arrived, and I told him, you know, Mr. Eisenhower, the version you see today is not exactly what I pitched 3 years ago. I didn't know what to tell him. So he watched the rough cut. It was 2.5 hours. He was very polite and serious, and he loved it. And he said he had his very good remarks, and that was over. So after those meetings came the real, meeting. This is the lunch. And the lunch, after he approved the rough cut and everything, so you're mingling, you're talking, mainly on politics, sports, whatever, but you have the time to ask the serious questions. And I asked him, Mr. Eisenhower, I must ask you, well, how did you react to the changes in what I promised? So he said, well, it's not the same film that I pitched 3 years ago. So he said, no, for me it's the same film. So I asked him, how can it be? I mean, I didn't know at that time that I pitched what is going to happen. How did you know? And he said something, for me, something brilliant. He said, well, you pitched a film about what can you learn about people from the stuff they left behind. You pitched a film about a German family, German couple that live in Israel in exile, like in this special flat. And you pitched a film about the grandchild that is curious to learn what's going on with his grandparents. And for me, this is the film. And I thought he was brilliant, because I understood immediately that in that moment he has no way back. He had to put the money, and he has no other chance but to be serious. I think he really saw what the film is about. I mean, you have the plot, you have all the things that we discovered, but underneath, this is the heart of the film.
Yeah. I mean, I would say just a couple of things that I promised to open it up for questions from the audience, because I suspect you may be curious to raise a few questions of your own. But just one follow-up, if I may. The film really operates at least on 3 different levels. You have the story as the one that you pitched, really, the story of discovering things from what in the German would be called the Nachlass, what's left behind, and sort of digging around in the letters and digging and discovering that. You also have the story that is really just about the kinds of family secrets that exist in almost any family. It was a year later that Sarah Polley, the young actor and director, made her Stories We Tell, which is a film from 2012 that also tells a very similar story, but has nothing at all to do with the Shoah. I mean, but has to do with the secrets that exist within family structures. And then on that third level, this is a film that has a great deal to say, I think, about the complicated relationships between Jews and Nazis and or Germans and Jews, for that matter, or within this much, much larger, much more fraught context of Holocaust history. And so, I mean, I think it's an extraordinary film in so many different ways, but insofar as it actually resonates in those 3 different sort of force fields, so to speak. And so that's not so much a question for you as it is a compliment to say that it's an amazing picture. And I'm sure that you will have questions to raise to Arnon, but you may wish to respond initially to that. Yeah, but then we'll move around do we have a microphone? Okay, fantastic. But go ahead if you'd like to respond to just that initial
observation. I think it's there is I see the film. I agree with you, and I think it's really working in layers. There are many layers, and this was my intention, and this is what interests me in any work that I'm doing. But I think there is another layer, and that's the question, or the big question of trying to research the denial question and the mechanism of repression, denial, some kind of volunteer dementia, all those kind. Yesterday night I was dealing mainly with this issue because the film was screened in a White Institute for Psychoanalysts, so that was there. So I think that their interest, so I think for me, that's another dimension I was very much interested in.
Is this denial?
Yeah.
A further dimension would be this question of generations, and perhaps we can talk
Sure.
about that as well. But we should turn this over. There are already several hands at the floor. Frank, you're going to help, why don't you?
Your documentary was fantastic. It was beshert. I mean, it was obviously meant to happen. And you really peeled the onion. I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary. And everybody's role in the film, you know, gave us like a whole big picture, their own big picture. I just wanted to know that, you know, I was pretty much on the edge of my seat the whole time I was watching the film because there was a lot of tension that kept building. And you had to, as a filmmaker, you had to make some very difficult decisions about how far you were going to push your mother and also about Etta. And I was really wondering, you know, when you went back to see her with the papers, I was absolutely amazed that you made that decision, and I was just wondering, congratulations on being so courageous, but I was wondering if you could just talk about how you processed all of that.
Well, as I said, the process of the film took, I worked on it for 5 years, and part of the reason for doing it is all those questions that raised, you know, to the process. And if I would refer maybe to the last scene with Edda, in the film, well, I'm going out for my meeting with Professor Wild and thinking what to do, and I'm going to her. Of course, in reality, it took me 8 months, this decision. And it was very, you know, I was really, to be honest, I was afraid of that thing, of doing it, and what would be the result of it. And I tried to think how to do it. By the way, I must say that after I found out the more and more hints of what von Millenstein did after 1937 and during the war, and in the film you see only one scene, but in reality when you're making such a documentary, there are many other scenes that we shot and of course much more research. So the minute I understood that's it, I immediately had no hesitation, and I knew I must tell her. There's no other way. And the real hesitation or the real thinking was how to do it, and I think it was what will be happening, and you never can know what would happen. Some people are asking me, why did you shoot it? Or it's a question I ask myself, and of course try to look on other films and what did people do, etc., like any filmmaker is doing. But the minute I understood that if I'm not going to shoot it, it's a decision I'm not allowed to do, because I decided to film everything till that moment. So why now to decide not to film it? And the only decision was that I'm not coming to her behind the camera, but in front of the camera. I understood immediately that I cannot come and like shoot her. I must be involved in the scene, because the scene is also about my inconvenience. And of course I didn't know what she would, how she would react. Now, I think this is sometimes the audience are not aware of it, but there is another place of hesitation, or where I am able to decide, this is the editing room. So I could decide just not to screen this, to put it in the film. And that was a big discussion, by the way, through all the editing. And I decided to put it in because of two reasons. And by the way, we screen it sometimes without this scene. This is how we usually do, and you learn the reaction, etc. So, first of all, what happened when we took out the scene from the film, we immediately found that the reaction of the audience became very much against Edda. I think in this scene you can feel her very strong, and something changed, especially in Israel. It was very important for me that people will feel for her, because I see her also as a victim. And this is so, when I realized that, I understood immediately it's very important for this scene to be in the film. Of course, there is the other dimension, and this is my decision to show her the documents, to move to play against what we call the silence connection. So for me, as a participant in the film, it's not at all possible to release a film like that without telling it to her and without taking the responsibility that I did it and now I must show it. And this is also my character in the film. My character in the film is for the first time, let's say, in his life in the film, is not acting according the Yeke rules. He's not polite anymore.
You're not carrying a bouquet in that scene.
Yeah.
In all the other scenes, you're carrying a bouquet. I'm not kidding. I've not seen this.
Sort of a follow-up question to this. I wish I'd seen the film in early January because I was at Auschwitz in January, and I spent an afternoon with Reinhard Haas, the grandson of Rudolf Haas, and now I have so many more questions for him, although he was much more revealing. And I wonder if there was a conversation with Edda also at that time, because it was very confrontational, if she asked you or you told her about Susie's demise or about Riga and your grandparents being sent off, if she had any compassion back to you.
Yeah. Well, I told her it's not in the. I told her that I found more evidence of what happened with Susanna Lehmann. In a matter of truth, when you're making or when I make this film, after I shoot this or film this scene, I wasn't sure this is the last scene with her. You should understand that this film right now is working as a complete narrative. It's structured, I think, very well, but it was a long process in the editing room to decide what's in and out and to make it look like that. But in the process of making it, you never know when is really the last step that you're making. So after that scene, I was waiting to hear from her and see where can it go, and maybe it will go. I thought in my head maybe there will be another scene with her, and but I would say that our conversation in I think it's something like 1 year and 3 months was the difference between the release of the film and the filming of this scene. And through this whole process, we edited it and we filmed some other stuff. So during all this time, I didn't hint or didn't smell or didn't hear through our phone talks and some other emails that there is a chance for any significant other scene. So it stopped over there. So, yeah.
How strong is your conviction that she did not know?
Well, I don't think that I show any I'm not convinced in this film. I'm searching. I'm asking questions. And at the beginning, I used to, when the film was just released, I used to sit in all screenings because I was very interested to hear, and I must tell you that in the first screening, almost every screening, I thought different about Edda. And during the shooting you know, this film was made, as many other documentaries nowadays, in very intimate crew. Only a cameraman, a soundman, and a producer, and myself, and sometimes and also assistant cameraman. So, like 4 or 5 people. And because we were such an intimate team, always, after every shooting, behind the scene, the crew is arguing. What's going on? Where are we going? You know. So I would say that almost after every day of shooting with Ida and Harald, we were totally confused. We thought, what's going on? Does she know more or less? And so that. I would say today, I think she knows, if I would say now, 3 years after, I think my conclusion is that she knows more than what she said, but less than what I thought she knows.
There was a question.
I was really interested in your mother and the parallel issues of denial, and I was curious to know what happened after the film.
Okay. With my mother, yeah? Well, first of all, I would say that it's my first personal doco. I used to make documentaries, and it was a whole discovery for myself how to do it. And during the editing time, which was a very long procedure, we edited this film for 1 year, which is, it is, I would say, a long and expensive time. And I found that I must somehow took, I would say, a remote you must look at the characters on screen as characters, not as your family members. Otherwise, you are lost. And maybe it's natural as a filmmaker to do it, but it was harder this time, even at myself. So I would say that sometimes I would edit a scene with my mother, and later on, afternoon, I would take my kids to their grandmother. She was the grandmother in life, but here she was the character. And another stuff, you know, when you're starting editing a film like that, so the first stage is just to see all the material that you shot. This is, you know, 160 hours just to see. So just imagine, you see here many scenes with my mother, but I would say 1/10 of what I shoot with her. So just imagine, in my age, you are going to the editing room, to the studio, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you start your day with 8 hours with your mother. It was it was very hard. It was because you look at other things, not just about von Mittelstein at that time. And so, step by step, I found that I look at the film as it's played by characters. And then, when the time arrived and I understood that that's it, we're going to, we call it, close the film and release it, then I start to sweat. Because I understood, well, it's not characters, it's my family. And here's the interesting part. So I immediately understood I must screen them the film. They didn't know nothing. My brothers, my siblings, my sister, my cousins, they didn't know nothing what the film is about. And my mother, of course, knew much more because she was but she didn't know all the other things. She didn't know about my relations with Edda. She didn't know about other stuff that she was not in. So we made this intimate screening. It was almost like the film was finished. And another interesting or important issue about it, or think about it, that it was the first time I screened the film for an audience that didn't know nothing what it is about. So it was a very, very, how to say, intense screening. And I screened it. It was, as I said, a very small screening, a small screening hall, like 20 people. And I heard some laughs, and I heard some remarks on places, you know, very family issues. And the film, you know, the screening finished, and they looked at me, and they said, you know, Arnon, it's a good film. And they vanished. And I was totally shocked. I came back home to my wife. I would say if I could, I would cry. I didn't know what to do, what's happened. Maybe the film is awful and they are very polite, you know, they're my family, or they just hate me. And I don't think I really slept that night, but I remember it like it was yesterday. 5 minutes to 8, the phone rang. It was my brother. He said, you know, Arnon, I couldn't sleep all night. It's not true what you say about my grandfather, our grandfather. He said that and that and that. And then one after the other. And I realized they just couldn't speak. They were overwhelmed. And they told me. And then my mother called me around 3 o'clock, something like that. And she said something very, I think, from her heart. She said, you know, now I understand this film has a significance for myself. And I think what happened with her is that the process or the procedure was much stronger after the film was released. Then when the film was released in Israel, it was unbelievable success and nobody expected that. That's another story, but there was a time the film was so strong that many people recognized her in the street, in the supermarket, in the bridge club, in the country club. She became like a celeb suddenly. And people approach her and say, oh, what are you, why are you this? You know, argue with her. And some other people said, well, you know, also us, we don't know nothing about our family, or also us didn't tell. So I think what happened, she felt she's not alone. She's not accused by nothing. And you know, some people during the making of the film told me, you know, this will change the relations between you and your mother. And I used to say, you know what, if it won't bomb them, I'm fine. I don't need more, it's enough for me. And to be honest, something happened, also with me, some openness between us. But it's something, and I can see it in her also reaction to other stuff. But you know, as good yet as we don't speak about it.
Perhaps we have time for just one question. I know there's a reception that will follow, but maybe if there's one burning question to be raised in public, please, by all means.
Well, first, thank you. It's a beautiful film and so thought-provoking.
Thank you.
My question to you is, you said that you completed the film in 2011.
Yeah.
So have you learned more information between then and now?
That's a good question, because I would say it in a very short way. Of course, when the film, first of all, there was a voice in myself that was not sure this film will raise interest more than very local or even family interest. I was not at all sure about it. And of course, when the film was released and happened what happened with it, I got many responses in phone calls, emails, of course, when I was in the screening hall. And from time to time, people told me, you know, very interesting stories that I never heard of. Of course, some are not at all in real, but some about von Millenstein. I would say that nothing was really changed any of anything that I just said or show in the film, but to say I got to know some more information that I was not aware of during the making of the film, and but it's some other letters. One German researcher suddenly called me, by the chance found a letter of my grandfather to Moshe Sharet at the time, who was one of the heads of the Sochnut, and he explained him about his reason why he came. And it was very interesting letter that I was very sorry I didn't know before, but it didn't change the information, but it was something in the hearing the voice of my grandfather, etc., things like that. I would say the only thing that might, I would say, open light, a new light on this, it will be if they will open the Secret Service archive in Germany. This is the only archive in Germany that is not open yet to the public. And it's mainly will deal with von Mittelstein doing after the war in the 50s, in this accusation about being associated with the Egyptian and the Nazar and whatever. But this is the only, and there's a big fight in Germany, by the way, to open it. And this is the only archive that it's not open to the public. Maybe there something will turn. But the same thing I would say about the Mossad. And because I found some links that, of course, after Eichmann was catched, they immediately approached von Mittelstein because he talked about him in the, what I think there. And by the way, the arrest, there is a long story about him that I didn't share in the film that I was aware of and I found through the research. But it didn't change the main picture.
Please join me in one more round of applause for Arnon Goldfinger.
Thank you very much.